Welcome to the Viking Age podcast, the official podcast of the VikingAge.com. My name is Chris Schad. I write for the Viking Age Zone Coverage, Bring Me the News, and the Brookings Register. We do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe, so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. Now, today's guest, you see him on the screen on the YouTube audience, live on a Wednesday, or I don't even know what day it is. It's Thursday afternoon. He is Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings and the Locked On Network. How you doing, Luke? What's going on?
Man, yeah, you get to about December, week 14-ish. You start forgetting what day it is. I feel it.
Yeah, and like I just said to you off air, I was working on the vaunted Brookings bowling preview. Two-time defending state champions in South Dakota girls bowling, but we're not here.
Can we talk about only that actually?
Yeah, we were going to break
down. What's the big what's the big thing to watch?
They're increasing their social media presence. I got to text the coach and get their handle so I can put it in the paper. But, the 7-10 split, they had this girl, actually. She was with the team and she was pretty average, but not like a great bowler, but like really, really good. And, there was some NIL stuff. And then she got an even bigger bag and she went over there and things aren't working well. Something about a torn Achilles. Hey, it's Kirk Cousins week, by the way. I still have my
speaking of overpaid and Achilles.
Yeah.
Wow.
That might have been what I was getting at. It's Kirk Cousins pipe bomb week here on the Viking Age podcast. And I don't know if you've heard about this, Luke. He's coming back. He's coming back to US Bank Stadium on Sunday. And the question everybody's asking right now is, how should they handle Kirk Cousins? Should they boo like Terrell Owens going back to Philadelphia? Give him a little polite golf clap. Should they chant, "Thank you, Kirko"? Thank you, Kirko. Like, how should Vikings fans feel about this on Sunday?
Look, I'm not here to tell anybody what to do as a fan. Okay, if you're at the game, you bought your ticket, you do whatever you want with your voice. Just leave the slurs out of it. But, like, I don't know. I think it's more about what is going to happen, right? Because I don't think his exit from the Vikings is very bitter at all. Like, it's not like he said a bunch of things on the way out, or it's not like there was any discontent. It was business. The Vikings wanted a young quarterback. Kirk didn't want to be on a team with a young quarterback. He ended up on one anyways. That's Atlanta's issue. They didn't tell him. They just were like, yeah, no, we're committed to you. And then they drafted Penix 8th overall. Just immediately like on a weird foot there. But here it was, you gave us 6 years. You did stuff in the community, mostly said the right things. He was asked about it in Atlanta media this week. And he was like, oh yeah, I know more people there, so it'll be a little more familiar. Like, he's like, whatever. He's like, between the whistles, you don't care. It's a football game. So he's been, I don't think there's any reason to boo him other than like every Atlanta Falcon will get booed when they run out of the tunnel. I mean, that's tradition. That's sacred. But I want, like, the first time he takes the field, I'm going to guess you hear like a small undercurrent of some people that are just really like upset that he made a lot of money. But for the most part, it's just going to be loud in there because it's going to be the first time the defense is on the field.
I think it's, like you said, it's just business with Kirk Cousins. I went off about it on Monday, kind of just, if he took the bag and he kind of went, it would have been fine. But then you see, like, it's
like, he didn't do anything wrong.
Right,
except,
right.
Like, on the field, like, he didn't play as well as we wanted him to, but like,
correct.
So did a lot of people. Like, that's what it is.
And you said for most part, he said the right things. Like, he never got arrested at a Wendy's for a disturbance or anything like that. Like, he was a pretty good guy.
That could have given him some street cred. I might have respected that.
Kirko Chains just screaming about his Dave's double with his chains on. Just like, where's my double? Kirko charges. But I mean, like, I'm trying to think of Kirk Cousins' legacy in Minnesota. And like, I would say it was just polarizing. That's the word I would use. Because like the highs, you have the 2 throws in the playoff win against the Saints. You have the bonkers week 2 throw to Adam Thielen in 2018. People remember that as the Daniel Carlson game, but I mean, that was an insane throw. The
one of the best games he ended up ever playing as a Viking. Was his second one ever.
Those first 5 games for Kirk Cousins, like right when he signed, like when Zimmer was kind of like letting not really letting DeFilippo do his thing, because he's like, we should run the ball more. But like Kirk was throwing for like 500 yards and like the Rams game a couple weeks later where Jared Goff went nuts and he had to try and shoot him out to win that game. Like that was probably one of the peaks. You have the 33-point comeback against the Colts too, but I mean, then there's lows. I mean, you line up under the guard in San Francisco, the 4th and 8 against the Giants. You fight Mike Zimmer on the sidelines. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of things. Like, what do you think about
fisticuffs? Clearly, that's really what happened. You're all
they're gonna have a UFC fight in the back alley.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
What do you think about Kirk Cousins' legacy? Now that we're, 10 months removed from it.
I think we need to be more removed from it before we know exactly how it's going to go down. Because, how did people feel about, say, Denny Green in, October of 2002? People were pretty low on him. And I don't think that that's the way it really went down. But at the end of the day, it wasn't enough. It was a fine quarterback. He was pretty good, really good for 12 games, bad for 4, and that win all the games your quarterback plays well. But I think he was at the helm for some of our favorite moments. Yeah. That we're going to remember really fondly, like 2019, the 33-point comeback, the Bills game that same year. I think the whole 2022 season, we're hopefully we can all eventually look back on that one and go, that rocked, instead of, crying about how it was, it was fake or whatever and talking about DVOA. But we could just look at, man, that was awesome. Like, what a cool season. So many cool things. And how he was gutting through a lot of pain in that one, he laid it all on the line for the Vikings. He got paid a lot, and ultimately those teams were not good enough. Everybody involved in the decision to acquire him is now gone. Everybody got fired over it. So, and the decision to keep buying into him is gone. That's really what got Rick Spielman fired, and Mike Zimmer got overruled and he got fired too. So ultimately it was the end of a build that could have been different, but that's where we are now. Now it's Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi, and JJ McCarthy is the future, and we'll kind of look back. But I don't think there's going to be any like animosity. You don't look back on it and say, like the way that some people are going to look at like Stephon Diggs, right? Where there was discord, there was a fight, and even Diggs, he said all the right things. He's never spoken an ill word about Minnesota since. But there was an issue between him and I think it was Zimmer, but. Mm-hmm. There was an issue. And so like Diggs coming back to the field in Minnesota and maybe getting booed, you could kind of understand because there was drama. With Cousins, he played here for 6 years. It didn't go as well as we wanted to, but then he left amicably. Everybody agreed. Okay, we don't get a deal done. Cousins wants something from the Vikings that the Vikings are not willing to provide. Go and God bless. What's wrong with that?
I think I think where my frustration stands for, because I said I would boo. I would boo Cousins.
You would.
Yes, because
I mean, look, he is the starting quarterback of the opposing team. You're correct. Getting booed some. Like that's tradition. That's familial.
And I don't think it's the frustration with the person Kirk Cousins, because like I don't know, you watch the quarterback thing, you're like, pretty good guy, and he never got in trouble. He never like. They talk about tarnishing the shield, right? In the NFL.
No.
Like he never embarrassed the Vikings outside of a couple plays on the field, which hell, that happens to every quarterback.
There is an elephant in the room there. And that's the political part.
Yeah.
That became so polarizing, 2021, the vaccine thing and all that. He became the face of that for a while until Aaron Rodgers got louder.
Mm-hmm.
And with, the snafu in camp that year where with Jake Browning coming in, that whole thing. The plexiglass, and he had all kinds of weird things to say. And what that did, like it was honestly in hindsight,
forgot about the plexiglass.
Hilarious. every moment of that was absolutely hilarious. In hindsight, it's very funny. But what it became, because I spoke out about what I thought about that, and people either agreed with me or they didn't. If they didn't, people didn't just say they disagreed. They said I shouldn't say that, and they got really and then essentially from then on out. Everything I said about Kirk Cousins became, you just don't like his politics. Anytime I criticized him, people just said, you don't like his politics. Mm-hmm. And while I don't like his politics, where was this energy for the last 3 years when I was criticizing him just as hard? I realized that it became a totally like party line thing. And a lot of people who maybe had whatever thoughts about Kirk Cousins they had. I think a lot of people, those thoughts changed when it was determined that he was or wasn't on the same side of them. And I think that made it a lot polarizing. And that is not what the Vikings wanted. That whole debacle, if you want to talk about embarrassing the Vikings, oh baby, did that embarrass the Vikings, that whole situation. But then it blew over, right? He missed the one game in 2021. Probably weren't going anywhere that year anyways. It was over. And then 2022 happened. Kevin O'Connell came in, brand new energy, everything. It was easy for that embarrassment to sort of wash away with the regime change. And then it was just a guy that played some quarterback. And from then on out, everything he gets judged on is on the field. But that context, ever present, at least in my experience, with how much I hear from people who respond to what I have to say, ever present context all the way through 2020, all the way through 2024. I'll talk about what he did with the Falcons, and people still are just like, you don't really mean that. It's really just about politics for you. Never has been, never will be.
I think this is great, by the way. Like on Monday, I went on a big rant about it, and Adam was just like, cool. Yeah. We should probably close the show now. But today it feels a lot like a therapy session. Like, how do you really feel about Kirk? Why do you feel this way? And I think,
it was just annoying. Like I'm trying to like break down how he read out this play, or like what his thoughts are, like what he was supposed to do against cover 2 here. And people are like, it's just because of your pilot. It's like, no, it's not. Shut up.
No,
I'm trying to talk about here. And if you think I'm wrong, if you think I've got the wrong idea about what Cousins is doing here, we can discuss that. I have been wrong about what Kirk Cousins did, right? I thought, he should have done this, and been wrong about that. And tried to learn and grow and all that. But I think people were far too quick to do it. I remember a few particular interactions in 2022. I broke down an interception that he threw in the London game that I was there for. And I was like, oh yeah, he didn't see this. Tyrann Mathieu got him. And he, made this mistake, and people were really, really adamant that I was only saying that to disparage him because I want him canceled or whatever. And it's like, that's what it became. And it became polarized. And then it just became as dug heels in the dirt as any political discussion in America will become. Disappointing, because I think he was a pretty interesting quarterback to break down like academically for a while. And some people are just emotionally incapable of engaging with that.
And I don't think, he's a bad quarter. Like when I look back at the 6 years, I'm not like, oh, that guy sucked. What are we doing? Like there are moments like every October you watch Kirk Cousins, you're like, holy shit, he's slinging it. It was just past its shelf life because you sign him in 2018. Mm-hmm. Your goal is to win the Super Bowl. You don't do that. 2019, you come up just short. And that 2020 win, I've talked with you about this on social media a little bit, and we've been sparring it. I view that playoff win as one that set the Vikings back 4 years. Because everybody got extended.
Yeah, you're completely insane.
Well, Zimmer, Spielman, and Cousins all got new contracts. And it was a sugar high.
It's probably the furthest they ever were for getting fired. And then 2020 went horrible, and they made a ton of really dumb decisions off of that. They didn't get any corners. They extended Kirk. They shouldn't have done that. And they should have known not to do that. And the playoff game is not an excuse.
And some of that's not Kirk's fault. It's not like Kirk Cousins drafted up a contract like, hey, you guys want to notarize this and then we'll just make it official or what?
I actually think his agent did. But that's how. I'm sorry, I'm being pedantic.
Just fax it on over. Just like, hey, contract's ending next year. You guys just want to sign this? Yeah, sure, whatever.
Well, he did that in 2021. Or no, he did that or Justin Jefferson did that in 2022. Oh. Or before 23. His agent, that's just how contract negotiations work. A lot of times the agent will say, hey, here's a contract. We'll sign this one. What do you think about it? And that's part of the back and forth. But I'm being super pedantic. Sorry, continue.
And like I was saying, though, like most of the things we talk about is like bad things with Kirk Cousins. They happened after that second contract. Like you had a moment or two before then, but then, everything just kind of imploded and you felt like the Vikings were spinning their wheels. If I looked at this, like if the Vikings were to kept Kirk Cousins, like we're watching Kirk right now and his arms like Peyton Manning wounded duck special in 2015 or whatever his last season was. You don't have the cap space to go get those additions like Jonathan Grenard, Ginkle. You're probably paying him $40 million a year. Like
they're eating 25.5 on him right now. So I don't think that would have made a huge difference, but
yeah, but I mean, do you even draft a quarterback? Cause you kind of have to go all in with
that's
him.
The thing. is he would not have stayed. Like, this was the line in the sand.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I don't think I'm blowing up anybody's spot. I think this has been reported now. But Kirk Cousins did not want to be on a team that was grooming his replacement. The irony of this is not lost on me. I understand it. He was under the impression when he signed with Atlanta that they weren't going to draft a quarterback either. Hilarious, whatever. But he wanted to be the guy. He always wants security. He wants to be he doesn't want to be in a QB competition. He doesn't want a backup nipping at his heels if he plays bad. And I think that kind of makes sense because, I mean, Kirk Cousins, the ups and downs are crazy, right? If you had a stretch like the first 6 games of 2020 where they were a disaster and Cousins was a disaster, you don't want he didn't want to have the option to have a backup that's reasonable that you could say, hey, could we put this guy in? And that was really important to him. And Rick Spielman always respected that, and so he never looked at getting a quarterback at any of these. But he didn't. He did, Jordan Love on the board. He didn't think about that. Never going to be
Jalen Hurts too in round 2.
Yeah, those, like, there were plenty of quarterbacks on the board at times that ended up being interesting, real players. I mean, they also balked on Justin Fields, and they were in trade talks. They didn't want to do a first rounder for Justin Fields, but I have to imagine the quarterback's situation and desires, right, make you just that little bit less willing to go do that thing. It worked out fine for them and horribly for the Bears. So, haha. But he was like, the second the Vikings said, no, we're going to draft a quarterback and you're going to kind of have to be okay with that. That was the end of it. He was, okay, fine. No more contract. Then I'm going to walk. Good luck to you. And that's, I think, both sides perfectly well within their rights to make those decisions, right? Vikings are, they don't need to be beholden to this guy that's not even under contract for them. And Kevin O'Connell didn't pick Kirk Cousins, right? Kwesi Adolfo-Mentis came in and had to extend Kirk Cousins to manage the cap. So both of these guys haven't really gotten to choose their quarterback, and they wanted to do that. And for Cousins, I totally get not wanting to have a young guy nipping at your heels. And if he can, go find a situation where he can do that. And by the way, a team willing to give him a 4-year deal where the Vikings are offering him 1-year deals. Good for you, man. You went out on the market and you found something way better than the Vikings were ever going to give you. So it's funny. We go, well, what if goodness gracious, what if the Vikings had given them that contract? Well, they were never going to offer him a contract like that. And that's why he left.
I think they would have done it after the 2022 season if they had done it at all, right?
They could have, but they let him go into a contract year. They did, and I think they talked about it.
Yeah,
they talked about it, but it was only going to be like a 1 year. They were going to just say, well, we'll add another year, maybe a couple void years, a little bit of extra money. They were going to do like just sort of tack on a little extra. And Cousins wanted more security than that, way more than the Vikings were ever willing to give. That was always the Vikings wanted to set up a situation where they were ready to transition to a younger guy. That meant a shorter deal for Cousins. That meant a backup that is nipping at your heels. Both of those things are deal breakers for Cousins, so they never got a deal done.
Yeah,
it's business.
It is, and I mean, we can look at it. You see it in other places too, like Saquon Barkley. That ended poorly, way more poorly than Kirk leaving, but Giants didn't really want to spend the money required to keep him around, and now he's an MVP candidate with the Eagles. Little different situation, but I mean, people treat running backs like 36-year-old quarterbacks coming off torn Achilles. Sure. So I mean, there is that.
Yeah.
Moving on to what the Vikings have now at quarterback. Mm-hmm. I mean, are you surprised that this Sam Darnold thing has worked so well? Because they're 10-2. People are talking about, you got to keep him around for JJ McCarthy. Like, is this all just infrastructure, or like, is Darnold doing something that could translate elsewhere?
I think that, well, that's a great question, and it's not ours to worry about.
Yes.
But here's my understanding of the Darnold situation. And again, I'm not blowing up anybody's spot here. This has been pretty well reported, and and I think a lot of people don't want to listen to it because it takes a talker away and they can't think of another one. But so Sam Darnold's been playing great this year, way better than I ever expected. But we were told. We were told by San Francisco, by even some people in Carolina, and by O'Connell when he got here, that this guy was different. That all that stuff you remembered at the Jets, you better forget, because this dude's different. He's older, he's more mature, he's settled down a little bit. That talent is starting to come through because he's learning how to take care of the football a little better. It's not perfect yet. He's still too turnover prone, but not so much so that you can't put him on the field like it was with the Jets and the Panthers. But everything you heard out of San Francisco was like, man, they have Purdy, they're okay. But boy, if Purdy went down, they would have actually been pretty excited to see what this guy could do. And it just never came up. And then you saw it in that one game where he played backups. It was a week 18. It didn't matter. They'd already clinched the first seed. But boy, it was kind of an interesting day. And you saw him actually play pretty rhythmic quarterback. Oh, well, maybe but it's only one game. We can't overreact to it. We had all these reasons not to listen, but we were told. And so that's why I said, all right, you know what? If you come out hot, if he beats the 49ers week 2 and he really plays well, I'll believe it when I see it, but I'll be open to seeing it. And now we've seen it, and it's here and it's real. And he's been the same quarterback every week, right? Couple of turnover worthy plays, one maybe a little bit loose with the football, but otherwise he's hunting explosives. He's hitting chunks down the field over the middle all the time to Justin Jefferson and Addison. And if your safety steps out of position for 2 seconds, you get a post route over the middle that goes for 98 yards. And he's hit that ball a few times this year. Like, it's awesome. Is that just coaching, or is he a totally different guy? I'd be very curious, and I'll be rooting for him wherever he is next. But here is the deal. It's very set in stone that Sam Darnold will not be returning next year. Trey Wingo has reported it. He's just said, sources tell me he's not returning. They are, and I think it would be completely insane of him to stay in Minnesota and be a backup to a rookie when he knows he can go out on that market and make 30 mil. Vikings aren't paying a backup 30 mil. They might pay Daniel Jones as a backup. He might be the one on a $10 million contract next year competing with JJ McCarthy, and he'll end up being the backup to JJ McCarthy because they're so high on this kid. But the Vikings are 100% committed to McCarthy as their future. Kevin O'Connell has tied his career to this guy, and in a way, so has Kwesi. Darnold knows he's not a part of that. He is here to audition for a contract. He is doing well in that audition, and he is playing for someone else's money. I don't know who does it. Was Titans, Raiders, Steelers could be an interesting one. 49ers could be a really interesting one that I wouldn't sleep on. And whether they have the coaching and the infrastructure required to make that work for Sam Darnold, I'll be so fascinated with that. But we can talk in the abstract of, well, should they try to keep Sam Darnold and maybe not go with the unknown because is he good enough for that? We can have that discussion as an academic exercise, but we can't, let's not get deluded. He is leaving after this year. That is happened. That has been decided, unless you win the Super Bowl and it forces you to reconsider that decision. But I mean, no, at that point he gets a statue no matter what. So whatever, right?
They have a statue of Nick Foles and Doug Peterson in Philadelphia.
They should.
Yeah, I think wasn't it at the front of the stadium, and then they both got cut, and they're like, yeah, we should probably hide this a little bit more. But I mean, it's still there,
a thing in front of it.
Yeah, it's well, these guys were here. It lasted not a long time. Let's talk about best case scenarios, because last week, little interesting. It was bizarre, honestly, but your colleague at Locked On, Peter Bukowski. Did I say his name right? Bukowski, right? Yep.
Bukowski, yeah.
He's banging the fraudulent drum again. And I went back.
He's rage baiting. It's what he does.
Yes.
You'll fall for it.
It's funny. I actually wrote a story for Zone Coverage, and I went back and I watched that 9-minute clip from 2 years ago. And when I was done, because I was putting in
the crossover.
Yeah. And I was watching it, and at the end, I was mad. The Viking rage fan inside me was just God, I hate this guy. And then hindsight, I'm yeah, but he was right. I mean,
was he?
The Vikings got bounced in the first round. So I mean,
they said they weren't going to get bounced in the first round.
What's that?
I never said they weren't going to get bounced in the first round.
You didn't, but I mean, I think I at the time was just we've gone with like juggernauts and whatever in the playoffs. Let's play some Russian roulette. Let's see what happens. Let's
Sure.
spin the chamber, put it to our head, and see if we blow our brains out. Like,
It takes one
sure
close
enough,
loss.
Ed Donatel had the gun. So,
yeah, you're gonna like the way they play, right?
Oh my God.
I mean, if you want to talk like key differences between this and the 2022 team, it's the defense, right? The Vikings have one of the best defenses, arguably the best defense in the league, although a bad game against the Cardinals, I think, sunk them to second in a lot of statistics. They are the Vikings, I mean, top to bottom, are the Lions with some more turnovers. Statistically, their profile is if the Lions turned it over like one or two more times a game, you create the Vikings. And it's funny because last time I remember that argument very well, and a lot of the evidence that Peter used, he can't use this time because the Vikings check out on DVOA, they check out on all these EPA and success rate statistics, and they check out on win probability, which I've held steadfast that if you want to find out if a game was fluky or unsustainable, look at the game script, and I think win probability is the best visualization of that. But look at if you look at the Bears game, for example, and it feels like this fluky thing. Okay, which team got more help from fluky stuff that won't repeat, right? The onside kick will blow everything out. So the Vikings controlled that game wire to wire until a 2-minute meltdown. That's the way you characterize that game. They controlled 58 minutes of that game. So what is more likely to project into the future? 58 of the minutes or 2 of them? And the 2-minute is also in and of itself a very 2-minute defense and 2-minute offense are very unsustainable stats. So if you want to lean on those, you got to understand you're not making a sustainability argument. You're making a situational football argument, which is a much harder. It's a much harder thing to sustain, and that was my skepticism with 2022. Is they were situational masters, and I was like, man, this is supposed to be unsustainable, and yet they have sustained it. I simply have to respect that at a certain point. But this year, for one, calling all these games one-score games is bad faith. I'm just going to say it right out. There are so many games that have been backdoor. Congratulations, you got a touchdown with 20 seconds left to make it look better than it was, but we killed you. And the Packers are one of those, by the way. That game was not close. Like the Packers never held the ball with a chance to get the lead. They got it within one score at the very end and needed an onside kick that they couldn't get. That is not a close game. We killed you. The same thing for the 49ers, the same thing for the Colts. Those games all had happened the same way. They were 2-score leads with seconds to go, and they scored a dumb garbage time touchdown that didn't matter. The Bears game should have been like that too, but then they got the onside kick and it got a little squirrely on them. But even that, you needed something nigh miraculous just to get to overtime where the Vikings could still had a 50-50 chance to beat you, and they did. They're down to down, neutral stuff. You want to sort away all the situational, sort away all the unsustainability, and try to remove as much noise from the statistical sample as possible. And there's really no way to look at the Vikings as not at least a top 10 team, if not a top 5 team, bar none. If you want to look at strength of schedule, you want to look at any of these things that you can usually adjust it. So you have to weave these narrow little statistical things and sort out just the exact right games and say, well, the last 6 games, well, they look too good in the last 5. Let's do the last 6 games. So you can, maybe get one of the the weird Rams one in there, and you can manipulate stats however you want to say whatever you want always. But the idea that the Vikings are fraudulent is just remembering 2022 and thinking it's happening again. And it's such a great reveal that you haven't really watched a Vikings game until this Sunday.
And I mean, I think they're right up there with the Lions. The top 4 teams in the NFC, any of them can go. I can't really think of, the 6 or the 7 seed in there. Maybe, I don't know. I'm saying Lions, Packers, Vikings, Eagles are my top 4 in the NFC. I feel like
that's clear. Yeah. I don't think anybody else is.
Yeah. And once you get there, I think it's just roll the ball out there and see what happens. It's going to be a series of coin flips. And I think the Vikings have proven themselves that they belong in that conversation. But
you walk into any game, it's 0-0 and you can win that game. Right? The Vikings walk into Ford Field week 18. Are you circling that as a loss? They won't be favored. but they can win that game. And if they have to do it again 2 weeks later, okay, they can win that game. They can also lose it, but they can win it. And that was my point in 2022. It was like we were having this fraudulent discussion. They had already clinched the playoffs. Like, well, this is going to come down to one game. And by the way, if you want to make sustainability arguments and then try to take a victory lap on them on a one-game sample, that's a bad idea. That's why the playoffs are not ever going to be the most instructive thing. And people were trying to victory lap on me at like 2 months into the next year. Like, oh my God, like let it go. Yeah. But they are going to be in the playoffs again. The Vikings are, right? Like they would have to lose out and then have some like miraculous combination of Cardinals and Rams wins that aren't those teams winning out because they still have to play each other. Like it has to go perfectly right for them to like uber collapse and miss the playoffs. They're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to have a game. And guess what? As good as they are, they can lose that game, right? You can lose a game that you're favored in.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be probably on the road unless the Lions fall apart here with their banged up defense. So they're going to go to someone else's house and if they do lose that game, that does not reflect on what they accomplished. And what bugs me about the whole 2022 thing is the Vikings accomplished a lot of really cool stuff. They had hero moments that were great stories that were, the Bills game was a great story of perseverance. The Colts game, unbelievable story of perseverance. And nobody wanted to talk about how cool it was that they did that. All they wanted to talk about was about how they couldn't do it again. It's like your older brother when you like shoot a cool basketball shot and he's not impressed because, well, I bet you can't do it again. Okay, but I did it now and it counts. So suck it. Like they won the division. Suck it. You lose. Like goodbye. And I don't know. Maybe it's because we are too trained to be waiting for that other shoe to drop because the Vikings have faltered in the playoffs. They've disappointed us. We've all grown up with it, right? No matter how old you are, you've grown up with it. But it feels like we can't just enjoy that the Vikings are doing something good anymore. We can't just say, good job, win. All right, we'll get them next Sunday. You can't just no, it always has to be, well, but they're not going to do it again. But they're going to fall off. I know it. I've seen them fall off before. But they're not going to do it. And it's like, oh my God, like stop being the person in August telling us it's going to snow in 2 months. Just freaking enjoy the sunshine.
That's hilarious to me because while Twitter wants me, for lack of a better word, dead, because I'm just sitting there being like, well, you can't beat Colorado, Dallas, and Winnipeg, but they're like, yeah, but we're the best team in the NHL right now. We're so 2x4 top titty or whatever Jake Middleton screamed out the other night. Like, well,
what, are they going to walk into that game against Colorado down 2-0? No, it's going to be 0-0. Who are you to say they can't beat them? Maybe they will.
Yeah, they're going to drop the puck and see what happens. But maybe,
and unless that game's tomorrow, maybe these people all have a point. I don't know.
Yes, but maybe if you're maybe a little bullish on the Wild or you're bullish on the Vikings, you can cash in at Underdog Fantasy, which is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports with over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won. Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all of your athletes' favorite performances. Compete against other players by just selecting higher and lower on 2 or more player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. Underdog is the best place to cash in on all of your football takes this season. Which players are going off, which ones are ice cold. Make your entries in just a few taps and turn your sports opinions into real money. Underdog also has vulture protection. If you select a designated running back to score in your pick'em entry and they get vultured, they will rescue your entry. Underdog has a game known as Red Zone Rush, a game you won't find anywhere else. Just pick whether or not a player will score a touchdown by swiping right for yes or left for no. It's as simple as that. Plus, your entry will automatically be boosted, and you'll get a 51% profit boost when you play. I've been an Underdog player for years. I might take the Kirk Cousins over because I know when his back's against the wall, he always shows up and throws a dagger or something crazy like that. You can do the same thing as well. Download the app today. Use the code THEAGE. Get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. And again, download the app today. Use the code THEAGE. $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. You just select higher or lower on your favorite players. Cash in on Underdog. You must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. void in Colorado. And if you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369. All right. I have to get going eventually and take the Brookings basketball team photo, which weird situation there. They have a really good player, but they can't build around him. Something about salary caps constraints. And, the post is really good, but if he just played a little more defense on the offensive end, or like the backcourt was a little bit better. I'm trolling again, of course, but it's prediction time. Vikings Falcons on Sunday. Who you got, Luke Braun?
Well, Vikings are favored by 5.5. I think that's a little bit too high on the Vikings, both because I think the revenge game angle, right? Kirk Cousins in a dome and all that. And like, we know that Kirk, every time he would have these like total crater games, he would bounce back and play well later. Like, it wasn't just over for the season. Like, the worst prediction you could ever make about Kirk Cousins was whatever happened last week, So I think the market is kind of overreacting that. They won't understand quite that about Kirk Cousins. But the other thing is, I kind of think the Falcons match up well against the Vikings. They have a guy that they can get the ball out into the flat, like on a check down. If it comes down to, can Fabian Moreau tackle Bijan Robinson or Shaq Griffin or whatever, like, he can make those guys miss. And I feel like there's an opportunity there. They are a kind of defense that, I got this from Aaron Freeman, a Locked On Falcons. We did the crossover. They have the right approach to Justin Jefferson, which is to let him have his. Justin Jefferson gets his and hope you can kind of hold the offense down as a whole and win the game. So I think that the Falcons have the right kind of team for the Vikings. The problem is they can't get out of their own way sometimes. And that's what undid the Cardinals. The Cardinals also had the kind of team that I think does really well for fascinating reasons, by the way, about why the Cardinals did so well in that game. I think they had a really interesting game plan and they have a really interesting team, and the Vikings brought out some of the wrong tools. But I think the Falcons, again, like, if you look at the teams that have been able to beat the Vikings consistently, like the Lions, which is about it, they have essentially said, Justin Jefferson, you can get your 150 yards and we're going to try to win the game on top of that. And if the Falcons do that, it can protect some of the issues on their secondary. I think they're starting Mike Hughes right now. So let's put that guy in a zone. Let's maybe not have that guy man covering Justin Jefferson, right? We put that guy in a zone. AJ Terrell's a good corner too, but they can maybe ask more of him, rotate cover 3, do stuff like that. But you got turnover issues. The defense has just totally no-showed sometimes and gotten totally like dunked on. The Broncos did that to them. So if the Falcons show up to play, they've got every chance in the world. And I truly think this is going to be a dogfight. I think 5.5, it's not really a prediction. But I guess if I'm taking somebody, I'm taking the Falcons in the points. Because I think that's, you'd be a fool to overlook this team just because Kirk Cousins had a couple bad games in a row. I think as Vikings fans, we should know that better than anybody.
I think it's a one possession game because you have the Vikings who always play one possession games and Kirk Cousins who always plays one possession. So it's going to come down to one.
Maybe we'll get another backdoor. They'll score a touchdown to make it a loss by 7 instead of 14 at the buzzer. They'll get you remember the last time that happened? That has happened to the Vikings before.
When was
you remember
it?
the game? Recent-ish. I'll give
you.
It happened at US Bank Stadium. It was that recent, at least.
It's been so long because they barely had any home games this year, so it's like a distant memory.
We
Niners?
played a quarterback. No, we played a quarterback this year, and it was the last time that quarterback was at US Bank Stadium.
Aaron Rodgers, the Jets.
No.
Which was it?
Joe Flacco and the Ravens.
Wow.
2017.
Wow. I was at that game. I should know.
Oh, yeah. Controlled that game start to finish. It was the 2017 Vikings. They were really good. And the Ravens were like 5-12 that year or 5-11 that year.
Yeah.
And they beat the crap out of them. But at the very last minute, literally as the clock hit 0, the Ravens scored a meaningless touchdown and made it look close. It's like, can we be smart enough to not look at that as like a close? They squeaked one out. No, they didn't. Come on, wake up, be an adult.
This is a very random story, and I'll say it quick. But that game, I think I left her because like the game was in hand, so I probably wasn't there for the last score. But there was a WWE show at Target Center that night, and they had just revamped the Target Center, so I had floor seats, but the stage was out too far on the floor. So like they wound up upgrading my seats to like ringside, and it was like the first time I had ever sat ringside. Like I had sat close before, but that was like ringside. So I was just like, Vikings won, and Kurt Angle and Roman Reigns are like 5 feet away from me. This is great. This is an awesome day. I think Sunday will be an awesome day for the Vikings too. I know Kirk Cousins is there. I know he's the noon nightmare. You got the noontime slot. You got Joe Davis.
Oh, true.
Greg Olsen, as
I like to call him. On Fox. You can't get better for him.
I like to call Greg Olsen Adult Bam Bam, or some people know him as Third Leg Greg on color commentary. Sure. 27-23 Vikings. I'm going to go with that.
I will say that would be the Falcons covering.
Yes.
So we're not far from the same page there. I think, and it's also just so like there's almost so much one score game energy that it might circle back around and then like not be. There are worlds where the Falcons just don't show up, and that would be great. But the world where the Falcons do show up for this one, with the revenge game angle too, I think that makes it more likely. Oh, come on, let's rally around. Let's get Kirk this one at his old, like
win like one for Kirko.
Yeah, like that's a thing that teams will do for this kind of guy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the Vikings did in Washington, by the way.
Yeah,
and like if the Falcons show up and play the football they're capable of playing, but it's just week to week if it shows up. If it comes to US Bank Stadium, I think it's going to be a dogfight. I think the Vikings can still absolutely beat that version of the team, but it's going to be difficult to beat these Falcons. They are good enough for that. I mean, they're leading their division, right? Like you might have to go into Atlanta and play them again.
And at that point, 4th and 8, season on the line. Kirk drops back to pass and throws a 20-yard dagger down the field just to end the Vikings' dream season.
No, I don't want to. Kyle Pitts isn't capable of that. Okay, he's
not. Kyle Pitts is incapable of turning a 6-yard or 2-yard pass into a 20-yard pass.
Yeah, hey, Mike Gesicki with a PR staff is not.
Yes. Very quickly, what's going on with Locked On Vikings?
Sure. We had actually on Friday's show, I got Pete Bursich on. So we're going to preview the Falcons game with him. Really good conversation. Fantastic conversation about the way the Falcons use their fronts and the way that they approach the run game and how that could give the Vikings certain troubles, and how a lot of those same factors work in the Vikings' favor on the other side of the ball, because there's some similarities between the two defenses. And I think both of them are good ideas for this matchup, but I'll let Pete explain all that on my show. Really cool stuff there. There's also my Patreon page, patreon.com/Luke Braun NFL. If you're worried about Dallas Turner, you want to know about what Dallas Turner's up to, why haven't we heard from him very much? Done like a 40-minute film breakdown. I went through like every play he had that was remotely instructive on from the Cardinals game. He got a lot of run in that game because Pat Jones was hurt. So if you want to know what he's doing, how we can evaluate him, and instead of just kind of going based off snap counts and saying, well, he's not playing, so he must be bad. Like we're skipping so many steps there, right? Let's watch the guy. We can look at him and know, like we can do this work ourselves. So go check that out. That's on my Patreon page. And I'm also doing one about their blitz counters, which I'm in the middle of working on now.
So you see it on the screen. He's Luke Braun at Locked On Vikings, or at Luke Braun NFL on social media as well. Mm-hmm. I am Chris Schad at The Real Chris Schad. This is the Viking Age podcast. We do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. Also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. For Luke Braun, I am Chris Schad. This has been the Viking Age podcast.